Hello, and thank you for joining. Daniel and I today talked about games 3 through 7 of each LCS and previewed the World Series, as well as talked about the top 5 individuals we would be most happy seeing win the World Series in this upcoming matchup between the Rangers and the Diamondbacks. Let's get to it.
Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking
weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are above replacement radio. And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianza. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. It's been a while since the last time we talked. It's been so long since we talked that last time we potted, the narrative was how bad these playoffs were and how we never had anything good happen in any games. And that narrative is long out the window with what happened in both LCSs. We got 2 7-game series. We got some very good games, some come from behind wins, some great pitching performances. We've gotten everything in just the last week.
Yeah, and
Walk-offs.
If you're listening here, and enjoyed this past week of baseball, the walk-offs, the one-run games, the late game heroics, you're welcome, because we reverse jinx this into existence. So you only have us to thank, which is nice. But yeah, it was pretty fun, having these competitive games. When we came on these microphones, last week, we thought the odds of there being one game 7 was really, really low.
Yeah, it was
2 game 7s.
Basically 0. Yeah, I mean we didn't even think we'd be going back to Philadelphia.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, not only did they go back to Philadelphia, Arizona won in Philadelphia, which was quite shocking.
So when we predicted these series before the LCS started, I had the Astros and Phillies, and obviously I got both of those wrong. But I think I did pretty well just on the fact that I predicted the NLCS would go 7.
Yeah,
that was a heck of a call, even if I had the Phillies winning.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some pride to be taken there, because I imagine most people had the Phillies dominating, and most people were pretty secure with their picks after the first 2 games. And yeah, no, it everything just turned on its head once it went back to Arizona, and even when it came back to Philly, it wasn't quite the same.
No, it really wasn't. I mean, Arizona held them to 3 runs over the last 2 games combined.
Yeah, it's wild, especially considering how amazing the Phillies offense had been doing at Citizens Bank Park, no matter what pitching staff, whether it be the Marlins, Braves, or Diamondbacks. But yeah, shut them down, and shut them down when it mattered most. Like Phillies were wretched with runners in scoring position the last two games, which we'll get into. But yeah, it's exciting. Like Rangers, Diamondbacks, World Series. The winner of this World Series will be breaking at least a 20-year drought. If not a 20-year drought, it's technically 62 years. And then for Texas, for the Rangers in Texas, it would be about 51 years, I believe.
Yeah.
So either way,
there's anyone in Washington that's like rooting for the Rangers because they grew up watching the Senators.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if there's anyone. I don't know if there's anyone doing that with the Twins, but
yeah, I bet
it would have been very funny if we had the Twins Rangers ALCS. We got the all Washington Senators series.
Yeah, yeah, that would be the battle for, I guess, the battle for Washington. Even though they both left, it remains that. Yeah, but yeah, a few people are complaining about the World Series not being compelling. I think it's pretty cool just to have 2.
I think anyone who's complaining about the World Series matchup is still watching anyway. I think they're just complaining on behalf of people that would have watched if it was something else.
Yeah.
Like, do we really have people being like, if it's not Dodgers Yankees, I'm not watching, as I'm a Dodgers fan, Yankee fan, whatever. Like, if you're a Yankee fan and you're complaining about it not being like 2 big markets games, you probably weren't watching just if the Yankees weren't in it. Same goes with the Dodgers, Red Sox fans saying this, like Cubs fans saying this. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I understand where people are coming from if they care so much about World Series ratings. I'm not I can't find a way to care. Like the MLB could come out and say, actually, we're just changing everything and putting the A's and Rockies in the World Series, and I'd be like, okay, when's first pitch?
Yeah.
Kyle Freeland versus Joe Boyle. Let's see it. Game one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, like we predicted it would be Astros Phillies again, and we would be looking forward to it. I think we would have seen it as an intriguing series, but I think Rangers Diamondbacks is about equally as intriguing.
Yeah,
It's
maybe not from the Nationals perspective, but if you're a baseball fan, like you were watching no matter what.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, I guess we'll get into that first team we're talking about with the Rangers, who, in their own roller coaster way, won the won the American League Championship Series and punched their ticket to the World Series. Lost all their games at home, but made it out, and because the Astros lost all their games at home, so they win in 7. But just going back to Game 3, we'll kind of go game by game, but the Astros offense kind of reignited starting in Arlington over there.
Yeah. So you have some notes here. In game 3, the Astros had a 50% sweet spot rate, a 25% barrel rate, and also the third highest expected WOBA and expected plugging in any playoff game in the Statcast era. They also had the most barrels by a team in any Statcast era playoff game. That goes back to 2015. I feel like there's a lot more merit to that now. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit more merit every year, which uh, that goes for kind of anything. But yeah, the Astros won that game. Only well, they won it. What was the score? They scored a bunch of runs that game.
I think it was 8-5, 8-5.
8-5. That sounds about legit. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, just hammering the ball. Max Scherzer had a rough start, which we talked
Mm-hmm.
about. It was a possibility.
Five in the first 4 innings. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a possibility. Considering he had a rough go against the Astros earlier in the season, and just generally like going into a playoff atmosphere after what 5-6 weeks of not pitching, that's going to be a challenge. And yeah, it makes sense that you're not going to be at your peak performance when you're pitching like that. And Max Scherzer, this year has not been the regular Max Scherzer we've grown used to seeing. And then yeah, the Astros in Game 4, they go on and almost just match that
Yep.
offensive success, actually outdo their offensive success in terms of run production. They score 10 runs instead of 8, and they had a 21% barrel rate, and they went 8 for 16 with runners in scoring position, and with a 50% sweet spot rate with runners in scoring position. So, it was pretty understandable of how they went 8 for 16. It wasn't just a lot of ground balls through the hole. It was a lot of line drives, a lot of hard line drives. And, it worked out really well for the Astros. And that was kind of the difference maker with the Astros when they won and when they lost. When they won, they were doing great with runners in scoring position. When they lost, they were doing horribly. And I think that can go for a lot of teams, but it was really poignant with the Astros because I believe they hit 429 in wins with runners in scoring position in this series, and like 143 in losses with runners in scoring position in this series. So it just goes to show like how much situational hitting matters in these types of series.
Yeah. No, it absolutely does. These games are probably going to be forgotten in time eventually, but they set up for a beautiful game 5 with a 2-2 series.
Yeah, that was a pretty unbelievable game. I mean, it's everything that you would want from a postseason game happened. Like it already had the intensity of it being tied at 2, the series tied at 2, essentially making it a best of 3 series.
Yeah.
Having it be the last one at Globe Life Field, which kind of put a little bit of extra pressure on the Rangers, but even though it worked in reverse this time. But yeah, they Rangers get out to a 4-2 lead after an epic Adolis Garcia home run. Not the last time we'll be talking about one of those, but they go up 4-2. There's a bench clearing, and then later in the top of the 9th, there's a 3-run home run to make it 5-4. It showed that the playoffs were a little bit different now than they were before.
There's been a lot of discourse this postseason about, when is the appropriate time to take your starting pitcher out, because there's the whole third time through the lineup thing. There's, uh, you know, treating every game like it's game seven, and doing everything you can to win as whenever you can. And people seem to not really talk about when the narrative for taking a pitcher out earlier goes right. And this was an instance where I thought Justin Verlander was left in the game a little bit too long. Because he was so going into the fifth inning, he had already given up, he had a lead, he had a 2-1 lead, but uh, he gave up a double to Corey Seager, a single to Evan Carter, to face Adolis for the third time. And I mean, you're up by one. The tying run is in scoring position, or is at third rather. The tying run is at third. The best hitter on the team, or one of the best hitters on the team, is coming up. That would make sense as to that's when you go to the bullpen. But they let him face Adolis Garcia. He hit that 3-run home run, and then they kept him in for two more batters where he allowed a single to Josh Young. Um, I mean, I'll get a lot into this later, but this was not a very well managed series by the Astros. And that's certainly a situation you can point to and say, hey, if this went differently, I mean, not that it really mattered in this game because they won anyway, but you could argue that this game created some momentum for the Rangers. It unleashed a different version of Adolis Garcia. Um, you can say whatever you want about what effect this series had on the Rangers going forward, and it's hard to tell. But one of the clear mismanagement moments here was leaving Justin Verlander in.
Yeah, no, it's I think a lot of the managers in these playoffs probably would have taken Verlander out. Maybe there's a little bit of a
Maybe there's a little bit of a difference because it's Justin Verlander. If that was Brandon Pfaadt, he's out of there.
yeah,
And
I
not
was
not
literally
even not even if not even because it's Torey Lovello and not Dusty Baker. I think that's just a common thing that you do.
yeah, like yeah, that's I was literally about to say that I think having, the just the resume of Justin Verlander and not even considering, the current day stuff or current day success against, whatever hitters he's facing, you look at his resume in a lot of big games, sometimes it's hit or miss with him, but nonetheless, like it's there's a little bit more of a of a significance attached to taking out Justin Verlander in that situation as opposed to a lesser name guy. And yeah, so Verlander stays in there, and Garcia was the number 4 hitter in the lineup. So I mean, this was his 22nd batter that he's facing that night. And yeah, he'd allowed a 109.7 mile per hour barrel to Corey Seager. He allowed a single to Evan Carter with a 370 expected batting average. Not expected to be a hit, but over a third of the time it is a hit. And yeah, I mean, and along with that, I think a good point to make is they had won the previous game 10-3 and did not use a lot of their key bullpen guys. They could have brought Neris out earlier. They could have brought Abreu out earlier. They didn't use Presley before, so he was available for probably multiple innings that day, especially considering there was a day off the next day. So yeah, I think there's definitely some justification for some criticism there because yeah, it's Justin Verlander, but it's not the Justin Verlander of even last year or Justin Verlander of 2019 who's striking out like 12 guys per nine. It's not that same dominant guy. So, I think you'd rather have someone who you have a little bit more confidence, keeping the situation to a minimum.
Yeah. So the score, so that Adolis Garcia home run obviously made it 4-2. It stayed that way for a while, and then in the 8th inning, still 4-2. This is where the Brian Abreu hit by pitch controversy starts. So I believe there was already a runner on when it happened. I believe Evan Carter reached and then to lead off the inning, um and that's when it happened when first pitch after the Adolis home run, he gets drilled on the back. He starts yelling at Martin Maldonado. Doesn't even acknowledge Brian Abreu, which I don't think you see that one very often.
No.
Bench is clear. Adolis was ejected, Maldonado was ejected, Abreu was ejected, Dusty Baker got ejected as well. Um, so I mean, I think we should just talk about how this was not intentional. I don't care what anyone says
Yeah, right.
because like the game is still within reach. It's for I mean, as we saw, obviously, right? Um, there's no reason to hit Adolis there, and I'm sure Abreu knows that. And obviously, he said after the game he it wasn't intentional, but like also obviously it would be weird if he said he did hit him intentionally. Um,
True.
yeah, but it doesn't make any sense why he would have. I know that he did everything possible to make it look intentional. It was the very first pitch. It was a fastball. It hit him on the back. He did everything possible to make it look like it was intentional. Um, but I think we can pretty comfortably agree on this show that it just was a ball that got away at a very unfortunate time.
Yeah, and it's not like Abreu is a pretty nasty pitcher, but he's not known for, pinpoint control necessarily.
I think he
The
only
ball
had
could,
one hit batsman all year.
yeah, but I imagine he had, some walks to his name, unless I'm wrong about that. Which can,
Um, 3.9 this year. So
yeah,
yes.
so an
So yes.
above average rate. So he's not necessarily known for that. It's not like, you know, Bailey Ober going out there and striking him like a guy who consistently knows where the ball is going. But yeah, it's kind of weird because I wasn't watching it as it was happening. So when I
Mhm.
like looked at it and saw it on Twitter, I assumed it was like intentional, not considering the context of the situation and how close it was. But yeah, I think it would make more sense to be intentional in like a 9-2 ball game. But I don't know. I think there was slight reason to believe because they had beef. Garcia and Maldonado had some beef, in the regular season, but just as it pertains to the intensity of that situation, it probably wouldn't have made a lot of sense.
No, it wouldn't have made any sense at all. But that happened. And that set up for an amazing ninth inning where uh Yainer Diaz coming in for Maldonado, who had been ejected, hit a single through the hole. John Singleton walked. You heard that right. John Singleton walked to bring up Jose Altuve, and Jose Leclerc. I didn't think threw a very bad pitch. It was a sinker, or maybe it was a changeup. It was one of those pitches that kind of runs in on a batter from the right
Yeah.
side. Uh, on the corner of the strike zone, Altuve hit it out to left field. Obviously, that made it a 5-4 game. It would hold. So the Astros would win 5-4. I mean, it was a ridiculous comeback, right? I mean, the Astros, like the Rangers probably felt like they were on top of the world at that point, right? Like you hit a big home run, your guy gets hit, it's at home, like you're the ones that are uh on the side of like what looks like jealousy or what looks like frustration, and somehow the Astros still come back and win that game. Like that's not something you see very often, right? Uh but that was a really fun game. And yeah, I mean, it was, even though they lost the series, that's got to be one like the second most iconic Altuve postseason hit.
Yeah, for sure. And like, yeah, it would change the series, it changed the series outlook for sure, even though it didn't end up going in the Astros' favor. It just made it a lot easier for the Astros to potentially clinch, which they didn't, but it made it a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, looking at that pitch, it seemed to be a changeup that ran in. So I guess, I think a lot of you don't want your changeups typically running in because they are easier to pull and they're at lower velocities. So maybe looking at that, but just based on location, it was right on the corner. So still, it was a good piece of hitting by Jose Altuve there. But yeah, regarding that moment, I mean that looking at the statistics, it increased the Astros win probability by 55%,
Yep.
which was pretty crazy. Um,
I think it
put
had a
them
pretty big CWPA as well, even like for an LCS game.
yeah, most definitely. And yeah, it was a big moment. And like, yeah, if the Astros went on to win this World Series this year, that would be immortalized in Astros history.
Yeah, obviously this is just all hypothetical now because they lost, but Yeah, I mean, it's very funny that some of the best games we've gotten this postseason have been from teams that got eliminated in that round. This Astros game is number one for that. The thing that I said after this game was that felt like the first game of the entire postseason that was up there uh with like any of the big WPC games from this year.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And one thing I also want to mention was like when I saw that happened, that's when I started believing even more in like the Astros postseason magic. I was like, that's why I picked them. They always seem to
Yeah.
find a way. It's just they
Yep.
always find a way to come through in that big moment, and ended up being a little bit wrong on that. But like, yeah, I mean, it seemed at that time like, yeah, they just seem to come through in the big moments, veteran led team, and just always find a way to win. But yeah, ultimately, I mean, came up just a game short,
Mhm.
which we'll get into game six and seven later. Do you have anything more on game five?
Yeah, so the Altuve home run had a CWPA of 13%,
Oh,
which I want to see how like in an LCS game, how highly that ranks all time,
yeah, and for
because the
those
LCS is obviously now where you get the big CWPAs. Um,
and
it
for
ranks
those
20th
listening,
20th all time in LCS games,
yeah, that's wild. And for
and it
those
was the
listening,
most since.
CWPA is it's so him having a 13% CWPA means he increased the Astros odds of winning the World Series by 13% with that home run.
And it was the most CWPA on a single moment since 2009 in an LCS game, and it was the Jimmy Rollins walk-off double against Jonathan Broxton. If weirdly that moment gets so forgotten in time, but it was game 4 of that series, and Jimmy Rollins hit a walk-off two-run double, I believe with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth against Jonathan Broxton. And that one did it put the Phillies up 3-1 in the series or 2-2? It put them up 3-1.
And I'd assume the Phillies were down during that at bat.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And there was 2 outs. It was yeah, it would have gone down to 2-2. Instead it was 3-1.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty big.
that one had a CWPA of uh 16. The highest all time is the of course the Francisco Cabrera Sid Breen. Uh you know
Safe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that
Yeah.
one in 1992.
Yeah.
36.84%. The next highest is 22%. That's crazy.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool there. But yeah, ultimately the series goes back to Houston, where it started and where the final two games would end up being played. Astros had a shot to clinch in game six, but in as you mentioned, one of the most competitive 92 games ever.
Yeah.
The Rangers uh take the victory in that one, behind some good starting pitching from Nathan Eovaldi, who didn't have necessarily the strikeouts, but had the soft contact to keep the Astros at bay. He went 6 1/3 innings pitched, allowed 2 runs, and a 78.9 mile per hour average exit velocity against. And for context, out of 400 playoff outings with 80 plus pitches thrown since 2015, Eovaldi's average exit velocity against was the fifth lowest in a postseason start. Fifth lowest out of 400 puts him at, pretty much in that top 1% of softest contact against a longer playoff start. So, he came through. He has had nothing but good playoff performances so far in these
Yep.
playoffs. So just keeps doing what he's doing, and then the Rangers seem to come up in pretty big situations as well.
Hmm. Yeah, no, the Rangers they've just kind of found a way. I mean, I didn't neither of us had them winning a game in these playoffs because we had them getting swept by Tampa, and that was like
Yeah,
what I thought was my safest pick. I
me
was
too.
stunned to see what happened there, and they've just, if they can, I mean, I think if they can beat the Astros, I know that this was, by record a down year for them, but I think they can beat anyone. And I mean, they have the 84 win Diamondbacks standing in their way, but we'll get to them later, obviously. Um, but yeah, what a job they did, because the thing that I thought coming out of game 5 was like, man, this is what the Rangers do, right? Like they don't lose normally in the playoffs. They lose in the most traumatizing ways possible. You look at 2011 goes without saying, right? They were one strike away from winning the World Series twice. They lose Game 6. They go on to lose Game 7. Um, there was the 2015, right? They go up 2-0 in the series against Toronto. They lose both games at home, go back to Toronto, make 3 consecutive errors on the 7th after going up 3-2, and then give up the home run to Batista, which became like what their franchise was most known for a while. 2016, they get the number 1 seed in the American League, then get swept and also lose. They have their season end in a walk off. Like that's tough. And then I thought this was just going to be another one. I thought this was going to be another moment in Rangers history where they lose the most gut wrenching game in a season that was going to become a what if. And they turned it around.
Yeah, it was pretty huge. That's why you have to feel happy for that fan base for sure. Yeah, like they came through when it mattered most. Adolis Garcia came through when it mattered most. Obviously, in that game 6, they were up 4-2. Wasn't the safest lead, and Garcia comes up with the bases loaded in what was it, the 8th or 9th inning?
In game 2, it was the 9th inning or game 6.
Yeah, 9th
They
inning.
hit that grand slam.
Grand slam pretty much puts the game away. And yeah, the Rangers win 9-2. Astros, by the way, went 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position in that game with a 75.5 mile per hour average exit velocity with runners in scoring position. League average is around 88 miles per hour. And yeah, and then game 7 happens and the Rangers get right on Christian Javier.
Yeah, I mean, it was not even. People forget he pitched in that game. Probably like
Yeah,
he recorded 1 out. It was a pop out. I think it wasn't even like that competitive. Which naturally, I guess, right?
yeah,
Christian, yeah, 100% of his outs were pop ups in game 7. That's what he does.
yeah, yeah.
If I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't even remotely competitive out there for him.
Yeah, he goes 1/3 of an inning, allows 3 runs, 1 walk, no strikeouts, has a 95.0 mile per hour average exit velocity against, meaning that average batted ball against Christian Javier that night was a hard hit ball. Allowed a huge home run to Corey Seager to start everything, and then it kept tumbling down. Maybe had a little bit of unfortunate luck. That's just going to happen when you give up that many runs, but still, was unable to strike out any of the 6 batters that he faced, and not get the best contact against him. Allowed some hard contact, and yeah, the Rangers just out of the gate were amazing. And that's especially true with Adolis Garcia. And there were so many stat graphics on it, and people were talking about it so much, but I figure we talk about it as well. Adolis Garcia's final 6 at bats, or final 6 plate appearances in general, consisted of him going 5 for 6 with 3 home runs and 9 RBI. Pretty much plowing the way toward that ALCS MVP.
What a way to play the villain role, going on the road. After that loss, it's like Adolis came out looking bad after that game 5. He's the one that got in Maldonado's face after the hit by pitch. He was the one that lost the game. It looked like he was the one that kind of looked bad, and he came out. To say on top would be an understatement.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it was such a, like, rarely do you ever see in baseball, like, outside of a pitcher, like, you rarely do you ever see in baseball the position player takeover where it feels like one guy takes over a game. And I know, the Rangers scored 11 runs and Garcia was only responsible for a certain portion of them, but still, it really felt like it was like anytime Garcia was up at the plate, it was like, I have to watch this because he could absolutely change the game right here. And he that's ultimately what he did in those last 6 at bats.
Yeah, I mean, he single-handedly took over. Obviously, he won ALCS MVP, and there was no doubt about it.
Yeah, although there was a pretty good competitor, I think people maybe forgot a little bit about, but Jordan Montgomery was pretty stellar. He had 2 starts and he had a relief appearance over in that game 7. Ultimately went 14 innings with a 1.29 ERA and I believe a 3.4 FIP. So, you know, a little bit of luck on his side. However, still a really, really good performance with that 1.29 ERA, and that 3.4 FIP is still very, very good in those 14 innings. Really put the Rangers in the best situations possible, even though one of the games he started was a loss. That wasn't to the fault of Jordan Montgomery necessarily. That was, you know, bullpen work, and basically that ninth inning was where that game was lost. And yeah, I mean, shut them out in the first game and shut them out in his relief appearance in 2 1/3 innings pitched. And you know, the Astros offense, it didn't lose them the game. You know, they lost 11-4, obviously, but they did continue to struggle with runners in scoring position. They went 2 for 14 with runners in scoring position in game 7 with a 17% sweet spot rate in those situations. But ultimately, it was really about Adolis Garcia and that Rangers offense, it seemed.
Yeah, I would like to go back to Game 6 for a quick moment because this was, in my mind, I thought, not when the series was over, but when I thought, okay, the Astros are going to have to really play very well in Game 7 to get over this hump. It was the 8th inning of Game 6, and at the bottom of the 8th, the Astros were down 5-2 at the time. And, right, that's what it was. It was 5-2. Yeah, because the Rangers had scored. So to start off the 8th, Alex Bregman walked, Jordan struck out, Jose Abreu singled, Kyle Tucker walked. So it brings up bases loaded and 1 out. And Mauricio Dubon came up, lined out to the shortstop. It was tough. He didn't hit it super hard, but it was just in the wrong place. And then Jeremy Pena's spot comes up, and Dusty Baker decides to pinch hit the one lefty left on his bench to face Jose Leclerc, the right-hander, John Singleton, who put together a competitive at-bat, but struck out. And this was one of the worst managerial decisions I've ever seen. It was an extremely high leverage situation. It was a moment that could have flipped the entire series on its head. A single a ball in the gap might tie the game there with Tucker on first, right? Or at least the very least, it brings up what did it brought up? Would have brought up the 9-hitter, which was who was the 9-hitter at the time? It would have been Maldonado, but they pinch hit Yander Diaz. Anyway, what I'm saying is Dusty Baker had 4 options to go with in this situation. He could have kept Jeremy Pena in. He could have pinch hit John Singleton, which he did, which was the lefty-righty matchup, or he could have pinch hit Yander Diaz, or he could have pinch hit Chas McCormick, who had like an 830 OPS this year. Now, I want to go through everyone's OPS against left-handers in that this year, or against right-handers this year, during their time with the Astros. Yander Diaz had a 931 OPS against left-handers. The only guys on the team with a higher OPS this year were Yordan Alvarez and Jose Altuve. Those are your best bats, period. And Yander Diaz was right behind. Chas McCormick had a 769, which is decent. It's a little above average. Not amazing, but, if you really want to match up favorability, that's not the worst guy to have up. Jeremy Pena had a 653, an 82 weighted runs created plus a 239 average. I can kind of understand why maybe you want to pinch hit for him, even though he's the reigning World Series and ALCS MVP. And then there's John Singleton with a 455 OPS against right-handers. And this is just in his time with the Astros. If you loop in his time with the Brewers, it's actually worse. He hit 150, had a 255 OBP, a 200 slugging against right-handers. And I get it, he's a lefty, you want the matchup, but like, are you even watching the games at that point? Just to give you an idea, his OPS against lefties in his time with the Astros this year was, come on, I gotta reset the filter. It was over 900 on the season. But with the Astros, it was a slightly different number. It was 930. Yeah, a 930 OPS versus a 455, and he took the 455 OPS. Obviously, look, even if you pinch hit Yander Diaz, there was 2 outs. He could have flown out, and it would have made a difference. But I don't know if I've seen a worse decision in a while.
Yeah, just whether it be, analytically looking at, and not it's not using super advanced metrics. It's just OPS.
And you
And
could even say, but you could even look at batting average.
yeah, yeah.
Like
So
he hit 150 against righties, and he hit 273 against lefties.
so whether it be analytically or the fact of like just in general, if you've just been paying any bit of attention to the Astros this year, you're like, who do you want up in the big spot? Do you want John Singleton or one of these three other guys? I think I think the unanimous decision or the overwhelming decision from
Is
people who've been paying attention to the Astros is one of the other three guys, and probably
Yeah.
Chas McCormick favorably.
Yeah, I mean, I get not pinch hitting Diaz there because maybe you want to pinch hit him for Maldonado, uh, and have him take over at the catcher spot. But even still, like
Yeah.
he was pinch hitting for he was pinch hitting for Jeremy Pena, who was a shortstop. Oh yeah, also they had like Drake Kessinger, but like I understand now wanted to pinch hit him because he was a defensive replacement for Singleton. Here's what I would have done. I would have I mean maybe you pinch hit McCormick because you obviously and then let's say he gets out, then you put Kessinger at short because they didn't have any other shortstops on the bench to replace Pena. Um, so that's fine. If you want to, pinch hit someone just to have them, just to burn them for that at bat, I get maybe that's why you don't go Diaz because you'd want him to pinch hit for Maldonado if the inning continues so he can take over at catcher. Um, and you don't want to pitch hit Kessinger because, you need someone to go to shortstop. I get it. And then you're just burning more guys, but it made no sense to go John Singleton there. That was a pretty drastically bad decision that I think, uh, obviously it's all hypothetical. This was a bases loaded 2-out situation. All it took was like a fly out, a ground out, a strikeout, whatever, and it doesn't matter. But I mean, you can't say that Dusty put his team in a better position to win there. You just can't.
Yeah, like and John Singleton also doesn't play shortstop, so there's not
Yeah.
even that built-in justification there. Yeah, there were definitely some questionable things. I think it was something you talked about um prior to the postseason even starting, like talking about the possibility of the Astros even not making the playoffs because I mean they were pretty much 2 games away from that happening. Um and the fact of like questioning maybe some of the decisions that Dusty Baker's made in the regular season. And, managers they do their job in the regular season, but people really only pay attention, or at least from a national landscape, people only pay attention in the postseason. And that was kind of an error that was highlighted there. So I think a lot of what will be talked about is like, oh, the Astros aren't back. It would have been 3 years in a row. They didn't get back this time. Had a little bit of it's a bit of a step back for the organization, obviously, considering like last year was 106 wins and a World Series championship, and this year was 90 wins. Barely cracking the playoffs, having some postseason success, but ultimately falling a game short of the World Series. But I think what needs to be mostly talked about is the journey of the Texas Rangers. I mean, as you mentioned prior, like we did not have them winning a game against the Tampa Bay Rays. We didn't really give them a shot against the Tampa Bay Rays, considering that whole situation, how the Rangers season ended and how the Rays were going at the time. But the Rangers have really defied the odds, done really well in the postseason, and probably, I think most people would agree, have gotten past their biggest challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I going into these playoffs, I saw the 2023 Rangers as the 2022 Mets, a team that, led the division the entire year, looked like a lot of fun, and then lost the division on, the last day of the season. And I know that like the Mets story is very different because like they just like they still played well the whole season. The Braves just went on a ridiculous tear versus the Rangers playing kind of mediocre baseball through the last 4 months of the season. Uh, but I saw the similarities in those teams where, like the Rangers are, going from Seattle to Tampa when they could be going back home for a week-long break before they face the winner of Astros Rays. And obviously instead they lost 3 out of 4 to the Mariners, in that last series on the road. Um, so yeah, I mean, I really didn't know what to think with the Rangers. I didn't love. I thought there was a bad taste in their mouth. I thought with the inexperience combined with all that, Tampa Bay was gonna kind of just like roll over them completely, and I couldn't be more wrong.
Yeah, no, me neither. I I really thought just like from a energy standpoint, they just weren't going to be there. I thought I didn't like Nathan Eovaldi going into the playoffs. Like he, out of people forget in September, out of all the pitchers with 20 plus innings pitched, Nathan Eovaldi had the worst ERA of those pitchers, and he went into game two with that, with riding that lack of momentum, and did pretty much the has been pitching pretty much the opposite for the entire playoffs, and been one of the best pitchers in these playoffs, arguably the best, if not for maybe Zach Wheeler. But yeah, I mean, they've completely turned it around. They, won 4 straight road games to start the playoffs. They've won they've still won all their road games, which is unbelievable. I mean, I wonder if that'll keep going into the World Series, but it's a true like underdog story when you didn't really expect there to be an underdog story.
Yeah, I mean, I props to the Rangers. I mean, they beat the 99. They had a long, tough road to get to this point. They beat the 99 win Rays, the 101 win Orioles, and then and I know that record wise the Astros weren't as good, but that's the Astros. Like you look at the teams that beat the Astros in the playoffs over these years, and it's some strong teams, right? The 2020 Rays, the 2021 Braves, the 2018 Red Sox, the 2019 Nationals. Like it takes a lot to take down this team, and the Rangers have done it.
Yeah, for sure.
Even no matter what the record says, I know that you might look at a 90 win Astros team and be like, oh wow, that's a down year for them. It's still the same lineup. I know the pitching staff was a little bit different this year, and Framber Valdez just didn't have it in this series. But I mean, it's the Astros. Like you gotta accept it for what it is. Like it's the same team no matter the record.
Yeah, every team that's beat the Astros in the playoffs since 2015, either beat them in the World Series or went on to win the World Series, except for the 2020 Rays. Those were that was the only team that didn't do
Mm.
that, and they were 2 games away from beating the Dodgers. But yeah, I mean, the Astros have made 7 straight ALCSs for a reason, and there was also that element of intra-divisional rivals. The fact that the Astros beat them, nine times in 13 games, in their regular season matchups, like that was kind of against them, but overcame the odds. And it's kind of interesting to see them going in as probably a overwhelming favorite against these Diamondbacks, which is pretty funny. I mean, they're going to be hosting a series now, which is crazy considering they were the 5 seed. But I mean, yeah, anything more before we get into the Phillies Diamondbacks?
No, I'm excited to see what this Rangers team has in store for the World Series. I'm excited to see, Corey Seager back in the World Series at Globe Life Field. Obviously, that's where he won his World Series MVP and his NLCS MVP as well. It's going to be very cool to see him. We'll get to people that I'm excited for later because that's a segment we have. But yeah, let's talk about these snakes.
Yes, these snakes who, despite being down 2-0 in this NLCS, went on to beat the Phillies, win 2 games, 2 back-to-back games at Citizens Bank Park. But it all starts back in game 3, which is where we last left off. Last time we hopped on these microphones, the Diamondbacks were down 2-0 in this series, but they win game 3 by the score of 2-1. It's a pitcher's duel between Brandon Pfaadt and Ranger Suarez. Not the pitcher's duel you'd expect in this series, but nonetheless, that was what happened. Pfaadt went 5 2/3 innings pitched, no runs allowed, no walks, 9 strikeouts, a 47% whiff rate, and 44% chase rate. Ranger Suarez, on the other end, went 5 1/3 scoreless, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts, 35% whiff rate, and 39% called strike and whiff rate, over 11% above average. And luckily for Lavulo and all the people who kind of follow trends here, taking out Fod
Yeah.
early in, or quote unquote early in the game, did not go against the Diamondbacks, and they get out of that inning that Fod didn't finish, and they go on to win the game.
So this is this is a modern postseason pitchers duel, right? Both guys getting taken out in the sixth, but
Yeah.
but there was so first of all, let's talk about the decision to take out Fod. He faced exactly 18 batters. He got taken out with no one on base, with 2 outs in the fifth. I don't think there's anyone on base, uh, although I could be wrong. But Kyle Schwarber was coming up, and Kyle Schwarber, people don't remember this, but Kyle Schwarber earlier in his last at bat hit a mammoth foul ball. Like it was a ball that had the distance to go out. He hooked it, a little too much down the right. It was never gonna go out. Like there was never a question of if it was fair or not, but he hit it. He got a good piece of a hanging curveball, um, and he crushed the ball. Yeah, strikeout fly out in the sixth. So Andrew Saalfrank came in to walk Kyle Schwarber, unfortunately, and then Trey Turner hit into a 107-mile-per-hour out. But for that time, like the entire course, like the entirety of the discourse was in the hands of Andrew Saalfrank because Twitter would have exploded the way that they did in 2020 if the Diamondbacks gave up a run there in the sixth, and luckily Saalfrank shut it down there. But he had no idea the pressure that was on him in that moment to keep like the state of his manager like alive, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's the tough thing about talking about these decisions is, when you take the guy out, you automatically are in what if mode because you don't know what would have happened, obviously, because he's not out there. And I mean, there are 75 plate appearances in the regular season that supported the decision of Fod coming out.
Yeah,
It was what, an 1193 OPS or something like that against him.
1192. Yeah,
1192 OPS against him, third time through the lineup. And I know, he had different stuff that day. Fod in game 3 had a 47% whiff rate against. That was not the norm for him. He seemed to be doing really well, but I think there's just a bit more logic in going based off of these 75 plate appearances that Torey Lovullo saw with his own eyes, when Fod went through that third time through the lineup, as opposed to going based off of feel against a really, really dangerous lineup who could just have the wheels going immediately, along with the fact that it's a tie game at that point. It's not like
yep.
the Diamondbacks have any cushion. They have only the game to lose at that point. So you go with the bullpen that's been, doing pretty well up to that point.
Yeah, exactly. And the bullpen we'll get to later, but yeah, I mean, they to their credit, they shut it down. I know that Saalfrank did give up a run in the seventh, but I mean, Fod would have been out at that point anyway. I don't think anyone
Yeah.
realistically saw him pitching into the seventh.
Yeah, no.
I think people are more mad that they took him out like mid inning with 2 outs and nobody on.
Yeah.
He was at 70 pitches, but I mean, it proved to be the right decision.
Yeah, and it's 3 1/3, one run allowed. That is a successful. That's a successful, outing from the bullpen, if you could call it one singular outing. But like, just thinking about, if I'm Torey Lovullo, just thinking about it objectively, you take out, and I know it's hard to take out what Fod did that day, but do you want Brandon Fod, who has an 1193 OPS, third time through the lineup, a 34% fly ball rate against
That lineup.
facing a lefty, who does really well on fly balls, hits a lot of barrels? Or do you want Saalfrank, who Schwarber is facing for the first time that day, who comes from the left side? Schwarber, I imagine, does much worse against lefties and spins 74% ground balls in the regular season and was spinning ground balls for the most part in the in the postseason. I think it's, just logically speaking, it's a pretty sound decision there to go with Andrew Saalfrank. He ended up walking the guy, but I feel like, 7 times out of 10, he's preventing Schwarber from getting on base, and most of the time, overwhelmingly most of the time, more than average, preventing that home run that would be a big difference maker in that tight ball game.
Yeah.
You'd rather you don't want the fly ball pitcher against Kyle Schwarber typically. You want the lefty ground ball pitcher
Yeah, and I
against
know
Kyle
it didn't work
Schwarber.
out. Like he just happened to, not throw strikes, but obviously he got Trey Turner, and yeah, the state of the discourse would have been a lot different if the Phillies had scored there. But thank God. And I tweeted this, and for as much as people rag on Kevin Cash for taking Blake Snell out in 2020, it couldn't have been that bad a decision if a lot of the managers in this postseason and postseasons past have done the same thing, and he was kind of the first guy to really do that. Like, if it was such a bad decision, why do other managers keep doing it?
Yeah, exactly. And some of the quality, like I guess comebacks have sparked off of guys being in there too long, most notably with, or maybe not guys being in there too long, but guys being in their third time through the lineup. Granted, it was Wheeler and Verlander, but Wheeler in game two against Wheeler in game two against the Braves and Verlander in game five against the Rangers. Like those were two, big moments that happened and sparked some, rallies, late into a postseason start. And there haven't really been that many instances where a bullpen just fell apart after a manager took a guy out too early, or quote
Yeah.
unquote too early. Like I
Yep.
don't think that's really happened at all this postseason.
No, I mean, knock on wood, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's been so many. Well, I mean, I guess the Barrios one, but that was also like absurd.
Yeah. And even then, what was it, 5 innings and 2 runs allowed from that bullpen?
Yeah,
And one of the runs was, or actually no, 5 innings, 1 run, because I think
because one of
Barrios
them was
was
a Barrios run.
one of them was a Barrios run.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, that's the one that I think was a little absurd, but other than that, yeah, it's kind of worked every time.
yeah, because
Like
that Barrios
The
one,
Phillies did it twice with Ranger Suarez, and I know they lost the game, but like, they gave up 2 runs over 9 innings.
yeah, and
And the reliever that came in immediately after Ranger Suarez was good. Like it was Orion Kerkering in the seventh that gave up the first run, and then Craig Kimbrell in the ninth who gave up the second.
yeah, and with Barrios, like he'd faced 12 batters, not 18, so it's a little
Mhm.
bit more understandable to talk about, to put that into the narrative. So yeah, the Diamondbacks win game three. Game four was pretty nuts. I didn't have the chance to watch most of it live,
Yeah,
unfortunately, because had to talk about Jaden Seabury and his amazing performance for the Louisa County Lions, pushing them to, I believe, a 5-2 record. And shout out to Louisa County. I will be there tomorrow for
heck
their
yeah.
football game again. But on that night, a little bit more notably in the grand scale of the sports world, the Diamondbacks have a comeback win, late game comeback win. Kind of what were some of the big moments of this game?
Well, the big moments really all came in the eighth inning. It was at that point it was a 4-1, or wait, no, it was a 4-3 Phillies lead. Um, and who was pitching for the Phillies that gave up all those runs? Was it was Kerkering, or no, it wasn't. It was Gregory Soto, and then Craig Kimbrell. Yep, Craig Kimbrell was had a rough day in these 2 games, but he came in, and this was the Alek Thomas home run game, and I believe after Alek Thomas's home run there was more. Yeah, so in the eighth inning, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. doubles. It was a rope. It was 98.2 miles an hour, 21-degree launch angle. So it was in a gap. Evan Longoria lined out uh, on a ball that went 352 feet. So it was kind of just like a line drive right at someone. And then Alek Thomas uh, took a Kimbrel fastball with movement into the pool. I think it went straight into the pool. Gone in 29 out of 30 ballparks. I'm assuming the one is not gone out of is San Francisco, and that's absolutely right. But uh, yeah, it was a really impressive piece of hitting by Alek Thomas. Not the greatest pitch, but he's not a guy that you're automatically thinking home run threat every time, and he has 3 this postseason. So credit to him.
Yeah, and they've come in pretty significant times. Like I think one of them was in the Milwaukee series.
Yeah, there's one in each series.
Yeah, one in each series. So
The Dodgers one was kind of meaningless. It was in game one where they won like 11-2.
right. Yeah, so Um, yeah, it was the Diamondbacks like ultimately coming, just getting the clutch hits and just, I mean, that was two consecutive games in which they won by one run. And I think something we'll get into later is the Diamondbacks were outscored heavily in this series. They just happened to win the key moments and end up on top more than the Phillies did
Doesn't
ultimately.
help. Doesn't help that there was a 10-0 Phillies game in there.
True. Doesn't That doesn't help.
Something I
But
learned, by the way, uh, Baseball Reference tweeted this stat, but there have been four postseason games in MLB history where a team won 10-0. All four of those teams went on to lose the series.
wow.
So there's the Phillies, obviously in this one. There was the Yankees won. Well, I mean this one's pretty predictable, but the 1960 World Series, obviously. The Yankees, I think they won like 10-0, 20-0, 30-0, and still lost.
Yeah.
There was the Brewers beating the Cardinals in Game 1 of the 1982 World Series. They went on to lose that one in seven, and then actually all four of these were lost in seven. Now that I think about it, and then the Royals won Game 6 against the Giants 10-0 in 2014 in the World Series.
Yeah. So you gotta avoid that.
Yeah,
And
you got listen. You if you're up 10-0 in the ninth, you gotta let them have a one.
yeah.
Or if you're up 9-0 and there's the 10th run in scoring position, you gotta intentionally strike out.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think, we talk about analytics, we talk about, being able to forecast your own outcomes, and that's one, analytics 101. You never win the 10-0 ball game in a
Yeah,
postseason
I mean,
series.
we all know this. We've been saying this since 1960
Yeah.
when it
Yeah,
first happened.
exactly. Like if you're gonna like it's hard to outscore your opponent in a series 55-27 and end up winning that series. It's hard to do that.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, historically speaking, of course.
historically. Um, back to the Alec Thomas home run. That pitch was technically, I think, I don't know if Statcast would say it, but it looks on the game day zone. Looks like it was out of the zone too. Like
It
it
didn't
was,
look it so it kind of moved out, I think. Like it was a fastball with movements. But it
yeah,
looked, yeah.
it was on. Nonetheless, it was like around the outside corner, and Alec Thomas pulled it into the Chase Field right center field and out of the stadium, which is really, really impressive. It takes a lot of power to be able to do that. No matter who's on the mound. And yeah, that was a huge moment. Ultimately, they go up on top 6-5. Paul Sewald comes into pitch and closes that out. And game five, it's a Wheeler deal fest once again. 7 innings, one
Game 5,
run.
yeah.
Yes.
Game 5 was the one I wasn't able to watch.
Yeah, you didn't really miss anything really.
Yeah, I did
Uh,
not. I could not watch a single pitch of that game, but from what it looked like, I was not. Yeah, miss. I was like, okay, Wheeler's dealing. Obviously, Diamondbacks are not doing much.
yeah, it doesn't add
Schwarber
much.
and Harper both hit moon bombs. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, ultimately doesn't add much to the narrative of the series. Wheeler goes 7 innings, one run, one walk, 8 strikeouts, 35% whiff rate, 35% called strike and whiff rate, and 41% chase rate. Uh, Zach Gallen, unable to finish batters off, goes 6 innings, 4 runs, 2 walks, one strikeout. One strikeout is very unusual for Zach Gallen. 2 home runs allowed and 3 barrels allowed. And yeah, the Phillies go on top and win 6-1. It was never really, that much in question once the Phillies started scoring runs and just how well you saw Zach Wheeler pitching. And ultimately, it's not a game there's really much to talk about. So we'll just move on to game 6, where Merrill Kelly just really recovers. This was really surprising to me. Any starting pitcher doing well at Citizens Bank Park on the road that's going to surprise me. And
Yeah,
that's exactly what happened with Merrill Kelly because he had a horrible start in game 2 where he allowed 5 barrels. It was the most barrels allowed by a pitcher in a game in the StatCast era, or in a playoff game in the StatCast era. But Merrill Kelly went out in game 6 and went 5 innings, allowed 1 run, 3 walks, and 8 strikeouts.
yeah. That was the big one for me because Merrill Kelly's not a guy that's
No.
gonna blow you away with his velocity. So the fact that he got 8 strikeouts is, I think, pretty impressive.
Yeah, and he has generally like an average or slightly below average strikeout rate as it is. Like, he's a pretty good pitcher, but it's not because of his ability to finish hitters off. But that's what he did against the Phillies. Helped him out tremendously, and he only ended up allowing 1 run. Meanwhile, on the other side, Aaron Nola had a rough outing. I believe allowed 4 runs, and a lot of that was because of the contact he was allowing. He allowed 5 batted balls in the sweet spot zone at 105 plus mile per hour exit velocities. That means, extremely, extremely hard hit. 95 miles per hour is the hard hit threshold. So 105 is extremely hard hit. And also, those were either, solid line drives or low fly balls that are, likely going to find a gap or leave the stadium. And I think one of them or 2 of them did leave the stadium. And those are the most allowed such batted balls in a playoff game in the StatCast era. And, I know I'm throwing a bunch of numbers out, but on those batted balls, hitters went 4 for 5 with 2 home runs, a triple and a double on those batted balls. So hitters seem to really connect pretty well. I know Nola kind of hanged a couple, put a couple in the middle of the zone that allowed the Diamondbacks to execute on them. And yeah, it was a rough start from Nola and a great start from Kelly, which is kind of the opposite of what we saw in game 2.
Yeah, I believe this was the game where they hit back-to-back home runs. It was Gurriel and then Walker, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I believe that's what it was.
Have to go back to the.
Oh no, it was Pham Gurriel. That's what it was.
Yeah. I know one of them was like a brutal hanging curveball or something of that nature that I think Pham ended up just crushing out of the stadium. Yeah, to start the top of the second, it was Tommy Pham home run and Lourdes Gurriel home run back to back. Pretty nice for them. And yeah, puts them up 2-0. They go on to score another run that inning. They go on to score another run in the top of the 5th to make it 4-1. And yeah, because of how Merrill Kelly and the Diamondbacks were pitching, the Diamondbacks never really let it get close.
No, they never did. I mean, it was what, 6-2 that game or something like that, 6-1, 5-1,
5-1, yeah,
5-1. It took me like 4 times to get the score right, but
you knew it was a 4-run ball game.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, it was just not. It felt so weirdly uncompetitive the entire time. I mean, the fact that they took I think taking the crowd out so early as they did, it really played a big difference going forward because like most big crowds in baseball are very reactionary. Like if there's someone on base, if there's a rally going, like they'll get up. But if it looks bad, like it's a library in there like that. I'm not even like I don't even mean any disrespect to Philadelphia, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, because like socially, if you just put yourself in the shoes of someone at the stadium, you don't want to be the guy that's like, it's top of the 7th, there's no one on, no one out, or no one on, 2 out. It's like, come on, guys, they need us. Come on, guys.
Shut up, they're down 4. Like,
you're the only person in the section that's standing.
Yeah, it's socially awkward. I get it.
Yeah, like just from that standpoint, yeah. So it's going to put the Citizens Bank Park in an awkward situation. And yeah, I think like that's kind of what the Diamondbacks needed to do is get out in front first, because teams have really failed to do that, and that's a lot of the reason why teams continued to lose in Citizens Bank Park in the playoffs up to that point. So getting that early lead and having Kelly maintain that lead, it kind of took the crowd out and made it so that it seemed like, yeah, the Diamondbacks are going to actually win this one. Like it didn't really feel like the Phillies were very much in that game in those late stages, whereas normally they're absolutely in that game.
Yeah, I mean 100%. I mean, obviously it was the first game they had lost at home all playoffs, but it was really even I think it was the first game they trailed at home even, right? They definitely didn't trail against the Marlins.
Yeah.
I don't think they definitely didn't trail in games 1 or 2 of the NLCS, but I don't think they trailed against the Braves either.
Yeah, no, never trailed against the Diamondbacks in the first 2 games, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think it was the first time they trailed in the playoffs, and yeah, it's night and day. It's night and day for sure. And in game 7, the Diamondbacks continued and scored first in that one as well, which helped them out tremendously. And that was in the first inning. Had some quality BABIPery go their way. I'll credit that. But also the Phillies, they come back. Alec Boehm ties it. The Phillies eventually get on top 2-1, and at that point, I'm like, okay, looks like the Phillies are kind of in control here. But the Diamondbacks end up coming back, much to our like. How surprised were you that the Diamondbacks ended up coming back in that one?
And yeah, no, I was stunned. Like that's not how it happens.
It's not how it happens. Only the Astros, or yeah, only the Astros might be able to do that. But even then, they didn't. They didn't take a lead after the Phillies took a lead at Citizens Bank Park.
Hmm. No, they
They
didn't. You're right.
they only won in games where they had the lead first, at Citizens Bank Park. So yeah, it just felt like you were going off script there.
Yeah, I mean the Phillies, what they scored their run quickly, but yeah, no, it was over.
Yeah, it was 2-1. It was 2-1 Phillies. Then in the top of the fifth, the Diamondbacks answer back pretty much immediately.
Hmm.
And yeah, the Diamondbacks answer back pretty much immediately. Emmanuel Rivera hits a single. Geraldo Perdomo gets a sac bunt down. Gotta love the fundamentals there. Half joking. Ketel Marte strikes out, and then Corbin Carroll delivers with a sharp ground ball through the middle. I think it was hit like 109 miles per hour or something like that.
Yep.
Uh, Pretty much splits the shortstop and second baseman and drives Rivera in. Then Ranger Suarez comes out. Corbin Carroll gets a clutch stolen base, and Gabriel Moreno is the one delivering in the heroic situation once again with a sharp ground ball through the right side, or you could categorize it as a line drive. But all in all, gets to the right side, allows Corbin Carroll to score. They go up 3-2. The Diamondbacks bullpen shuts it down.
Yeah.
Diamondbacks Diamondbacks
By the
bullpen
way,
doesn't allow a run.
yeah, I mean it's so funny that we're at this point now because no one could have seen us being here a month ago, but Joe Mantiply gets that out to end the fifth, and I'm thinking, okay, Thompson, Saul Frank, Ginkle, and Seawald, and that's it. And that's exactly what happened. But imagine saying those four words, those four names back to back to back to back in mid September. Like people are like, wait, Ginkle, Kevin Ginkle, Saul Frank, what?
Exactly.
Thompson, that guy from the Rays, isn't
Exactly.
isn't he still on Tampa? No,
Right.
they're an elite bullpen on the Diamondbacks actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, heading into this postseason, like I was one of the like I out of all the bullpens in these playoffs, I was like maybe the least confident in the Diamondbacks, maybe the Rangers, ironically enough, were I was less confident in. But yeah, the Diamondbacks have a 2.94 bullpen ERA in these playoffs, which is pretty crazy. And yeah, it's funny to think about. Yeah, it's like, oh, come on, you got the Seawald Ginkle, Saul Frank Thompson combination. Like we're talking about, the 2015 Royals here. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
Davis, Holland, Herrera, Hoshaver, like you're done.
Yeah.
Last year was, Presley, Montero, Abreu. You're done. Get out of here. Whereas this year, it's like this crew of kind of like, in a flattering sense, to make it flattering, a bunch of misfits who kind
Yeah.
of found
Like,
themselves on the Diamondbacks are just out there just killing it.
yeah, if you ask the average baseball fan how many of those guys they had heard of before a month ago, I'd bet it's Seawald. If we're talking like big guys that like pay attention to every team, it's like Seawald probably a decent amount because he's been the closer over there in Seattle for a while. Mets fans might remember him. Thompson, maybe some guys remember him from being a part of like the Rays team that had the stable. Ginkle, like, if you followed the Diamondbacks enough, you'd know that he's been there a couple of years. Saul Frank, if you're a Diamondbacks fan, and that's it.
Yeah, Saul Frank, I found out about in the wild card series.
Yep. When he came in and didn't he got out of like a bases loaded 1 out jam, right?
Yeah, with two ground
He
balls.
got 2 ground balls, yeah, and I was like, wow, that's what he does. That's
Yeah.
what Andrew Stallfrank is out there doing. That's what
Yep.
he did for 10 innings this year.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it is funny to see that. But yeah, it's really about having your bullpen get hot at the right time, and they seem to
Mhm.
be continuing to do that. And they did that against the Phillies. And yeah, as much of a credit you can have to the Diamondbacks and their pitching in game 6 and 7, you can also talk about the Phillies offense, who, like this was really painful for Phillies fans. I can definitely tell from experience of just watching your team fail with runners in scoring position in the playoffs. That is an absolute nightmare, and that's what happened at Citizens Bank Park on Monday and Tuesday. Was in the final 2 games of the series, the Phillies went 2 for 17 with 7 strikeouts with runners in scoring position. The 7 strikeouts is a real insult to injury, because you're not putting the ball in play, you're decreasing the chance of you getting on base or getting a hit, and you're not even getting that sac fly that could potentially bring someone in, or even
you're not getting like a ground ball that moves the guy from second to third.
Yeah, exactly. Or even a bases loaded, nobody out double play that could score a run.
Yep.
Not even that. But yeah, that's what kind of killed the Phillies. They were able to get some guys on, but were unable to capitalize on getting those guys in. And some of that had to do with some of their key performers just after game 2 kind of disappeared, most notably Trey Turner and Nick Castellanos. Trey Turner
0 for 23.
Yeah, Trey Turner after game 2 slashed 105, 143, 105 for a 248 OPS. He had an 85.5 mile per hour average exit velocity, 19% sweet spot rate, 13% line drive rate, 0 hard hit line drives, and 0 barrels. And last episode, I was talking about how amazing his hard hit line drive rate and his barrel rate were leading up to game 3 of the NLCS. Nick Castellanos after game 2 went 0 for 18 with a walk and 9 strikeouts. It was a 47% strikeout rate after game 2 for Nick Castellanos. And I don't know if you saw his post-game comments. He was very critical of himself. It was pretty refreshing to seeing a guy with that much open honesty and talking about how much he struggled after game 2, and maybe even after game 1. But
yeah, he went 0 for 2 in game 2.
Okay, yeah.
And what did he go in game 1?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure he went 0 for 23 entirely.
In the series,
not in the series, but like over his last 23.
Yeah,
he went 1 for 4 in game 1. He had 1 hit the entire series.
Yeah,
that's insane. It's funny because he was doing so well in the division series, and people were like, "Man, why do they keep putting Alec Boehm 4th when they have Nick Castellanos sitting 7th?"
Yeah.
And I mean, Boehm did homer in game 7. I know that his stats throughout the playoffs weren't great, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Some guys just were shut down. Even Bryce Harper, it's not as extreme as Turner or Castellanos, but Bryce Harper after game 2 hit 125 with a 613 OPS. He did have a barrel that went to the warning track with a guy on in game 7, but only ended up reaching the warning track and ended up being a fly out. Another statistic.
That Harper versus Trout discourse from like a week ago looks so bad now.
Yeah, really.
Like they were up 2-0, and I get it. I thought the series was over when the Phillies went up 2-0. I think most people did, except for Troy Lavello. But yeah, like it looked like a foregone conclusion that the Phillies were gonna win in Arizona. They were gonna get to the World Series, face one of the Texas teams, get a revenge at the Astros or get at the Rangers. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever felt so much like secondhand heartbreak for another franchise, because like I feel like if you're a Phillies fan, like 2011 was tough, but at the very least, a lot of that core did get their ring in 2008. This is different. Like this, I feel like this one's a different type of heartbreak than in 2011, because for one, you got to see this team win 2 different playoff series. In 2011, they lost the very first one.
Yeah.
They got shut out in game 5, and that was brutal. But I think we're going to be talking about this team for a while as a big what if team.
Yeah,
like the same way that we talked about like the Tigers in the early 2010s, the way that we talk about the Nationals in the mid 2010s before they finally got it in 2019. Like that and I know it's only been a 2-year window and they've never even won a division, but I feel like that's how we might be talking about this Phillies core if they don't get this close again.
Yeah, very true, because you think about like much of heartbreak comes with high expectations. And once the Phillies got past the break, I mean, the Braves were going to be their biggest challenge. I mean, they were literally regular season record wise the biggest challenge out there. Won 104 games, and won that season series 8-5 against the Phillies. So you go from
The Diamondbacks won 30 less games.
yeah,
20 less games. 20 less games.
So you go from that giant Goliath in the Braves, you beat them. That's your big triumph. It's kind of all downhill from there. You have the 6th seed coming in, an 84-win team that in the regular season had more runs scored against them than they scored, which is very funny to think about now. And you win game 5 to go up 3-2, heading back to your stadium where you've been unstoppable up to that point. Like, I don't think anyone in their right mind was thinking that the Diamondbacks were going to win both games. And there's a reason why Chris Russo said he was going to retire if the Diamondbacks won both games, because it was highly unlikely that they were going to do that. So yeah, that is a heartbreaking moment, especially considering this was probably an easier path than last year. Whether they were facing the Astros or facing the Rangers, it was going to be an easier World Series than last year. But
I mean, not
there is
only
no
did
World
they
Series.
not only did they lose games 6 and 7 at home, but like they were tied going into the ninth of game 3. That's a game they could have won if the bullpen didn't give up a run in the ninth. They were up 1 in the 8th inning of game 4. They ended up completely losing it in that one. Like, they had so many opportunities where, if a couple bounces went our way, all they had to do was win one more game, and all 4 of the games they lost were in some way winnable. Whether it's because they were at home or because it was a close game in the late innings that got away from them.
Yeah, and it's kind of emphasized when you realize that they did outscore the Diamondbacks 30-21.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of outplayed them in some sense, I guess you could say, but they just didn't win in the big moments like the Diamondbacks did. And I think Phillies fans will think a lot about game 4, being up 5-3 in that one. And I think they'll think a lot about game 7 of going 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position as well, and all the opportunities they missed there.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a time of mourning in Philadelphia, unfortunately. But the Diamondbacks make their first World Series in 20 years. Not only have they not won a World Series in 20 years, they haven't been to a World Series in 20 years. Pretty cool for that fan base, considering, like, I think people have mentioned a lot. They had their playoff odds on like August 11th were 13%, and here they are.
Yeah,
we didn't know
they went under 500 in the second half.
Yeah, heading into the final like 3 days of the season, we didn't know if either of these teams were making the playoffs, and here they are, in the World Series. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's 2 teams that we thought would get swept in the first round. I don't think either of us have picked either of these teams to win any series so far, except for you picking the Rangers against Baltimore.
Yeah, but even then, I didn't keep that belief for the Astros.
No, like, it's fun. I mean, the Diamondbacks have just continued to make no sense. Like, after game 2, I was like, okay, finally, the Diamondbacks are playing the way I expected them to. And I was like, okay, Phillies are gonna go in there and they're gonna continue to dominate. And no, the Diamondbacks just continued to not make sense at all. And one thing I said was like, with the Rangers was like, oh, they did the week 1 Houston chant. It doesn't work. You can't do it. Well, it worked. They did it, and it worked. They wanted Houston. They got Houston, and they beat Houston.
Yeah, they wanted Houston so bad that they didn't even bother winning at home. They wanted to win in Houston.
Yeah,
the entire time. That's all they did. Yeah, it's exciting. I'm the more I think about it, the more I'm excited I am for this. Like, I feel like there's just going to be some fun games. I feel like there's just going to be some memorable moments because, both of these teams have provided that for us. And no matter who wins this World Series, you're going to kind of get a feel good aspect of it.
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of transitions into what we wanted to talk about here, which was the top 5, players, whether it be players, managers, assistant coaches, executives, owners, even. I don't know how good you can feel for an owner.
I don't think there's a single owner in the world. I'm like, good for them. They just
finally something going their way.
Yeah, right.
But
they've been so due for anything to make them happy for a while.
Yeah. But top 5 people we'd most be happy for winning a World Series. And I'm going into this not having too much knowledge of a lot of people's stories. I'm sure that, there's a lot of people that had, had a lot of things not go their way growing up, but I don't know every single person's story. So I apologize if I'm missing a big one that, should be talked about. But, who are some of so I guess
I'll go through my 5 through 1 list. So at number 5, in terms of people I'd be most happy for if they won it, I'm going with Torey Lovullo. He's the manager of the Diamondbacks. And, I think for me, this one more just strikes personally because of the Red Sox connection. He was the Red Sox bench coach in the mid 2010s. And he in 2015, he took over as the interim manager of the Red Sox when John Farrell uh, stepped away for health reasons. And the team performed very well. A last place team performed very well in his stint. And I wanted the Red Sox to hire him after 2016. Instead, he took the job with Arizona, made the playoffs his first year there, won Manager of the Year in his first year full time as a manager. And I've always been happy for him. I've always wanted him to succeed. And, he came in as a big underdog. He's been kind of a big story these entire playoffs. And he's a guy that I would love to see go all the way.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. For me, I only have I only have like 3 guys that stand out for me. Maybe I'll just mention numbers 3 through 1 for me, because I'm having a hard time thinking of
Okay.
more guys because I didn't fully, admittedly I didn't fully prepare. But I think number
fine.
3 for me is Torey Lovullo, Lovullo.
Lovullo.
Yeah, like he has been there through the mud of the Arizona Diamondbacks. He was there for a 52 win season, and I don't know how much of it was his fault. Ultimately, probably not really his fault. He seems to be a pretty good manager, but he's been there through it all with the Diamondbacks. He was, the highest paid bench coach with the Red Sox. I think I have his autograph somewhere, actually. Funnily enough, he actually asked me, like, it was at Red Sox spring training. He was like, "Do you even know who I am?" And I was one of the few people that probably did know who he was, because it's like,
Let's go.
How
is that guy not number 1?
Yeah, he's the best. He seems pretty cool.
For you.
But
yeah.
But yeah, he seems like and he's gone through a lot of people questioning his decisions throughout this playoffs. Every Brandon Pfaadt start, it seems people are questioning what he does, even though it seems to work every single time. So yeah, I'd feel positive for Torey Lovullo. Who's your number 4?
My number 4, I'm going with a guy on the Rangers. This is one of only 2 players I have, but it's Marcus Semien. Marcus Semien is a guy that's I think doesn't get enough appreciation, generally speaking. I mean, I think he's for a couple of years now been the slam dunk best second baseman in baseball. With Jose Altuve as a close second, and maybe just coming into this year with Altuve being injured, I think that. But I mean, this is a guy that's among the top of the F4 leaderboard every year as someone who, participates in an F4 league. He's a guy, and I think the thing that most stands out for me is that he signed that contract with the Rangers before Corey Seager did. So he signed with a team for big money coming off of a 100 loss season with, as of at that point, no one else, coming back, or, no new additions other than himself. I think they had signed John Gray at that point, but, when he signed that contract, I'm imagining he was thinking, okay, I got, a decade on this deal. We're going to get there at some point. He's there in year 2. And I mean, it's looking like he made a great decision to invest in that team when he signed with them. And, I'm very happy that he's getting a lot of the national spotlight this year. I believe this is his first time in the playoffs, with fans beyond just the wild card round ever, because, I mean, I am adding a couple caveats there, but, 2019 lost in the wild card game, 2020, no fans. 2021, he was on a great Blue Jays team that missed. And I don't think he ever made it before that. Oh, 2018 also lost in the wild card game. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy that he's experiencing a deep playoff run, and I think he deserves it.
Yeah, a fairly underrated player too. Just like,
yes,
it kind of does it all, so he doesn't stick out in any particular leaderboards. It's outside of like wins above replacement. So it's not like he's outside of that 1 year. It's not like he's been much of a 45 home run guy or a 50 stolen base guy, or I don't know if he's won a Gold Glove yet. Maybe he has, but even still, it doesn't get the most recognition despite how great he is. Because I have less guys, what is your number three?
My number three is Evan Longoria. I think this one kind of needs less of an explanation. He's a guy that's uh, in his 16th professional season. He's going back to the World Series for the first time since his rookie year in 2008. Um, I'm happy that I think it'd be cool for him to win a World Series on a team that people would have otherwise forgotten that he even played for. He's a guy that I've really wanted to make a Hall of Fame case for a couple years. And I know that, he hasn't been a major contributor in the playoffs, and he still has room to do that in the World Series. But even if he's not, I think just the fact that he won a World Series would help his case a little bit. Um, and, he's a guy that I think has been very easy to root for his entire career. He's played for I mean, the fact that he's made a World Series for both of the most recent expansion teams is pretty cool.
Yeah,
Like, I'm gonna go ahead and assume no one else has done that. I don't think anyone was on the '08 Rays and the 2001 Diamondbacks, to my knowledge. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think so. Not
yeah,
no one's standing out to me, but yeah, I mean, I think it's very cool that he's always played for a lot of, I think, underdog teams, and he's been, for a while he was the guy on the Rays. I mean, he's the best player in their franchise's history. Um, he has a very bubble Hall of Fame case. I think he has. I could see him taking like a Jeff Kent type of route, or maybe like a Fred McGriff type route, where he, you know, gets enough support to like be a conversation topic on the BBWA ballot, and then maybe falls off, maybe gets in sneakily, maybe like a Larry Walker type. But I think winning a World Series would help his case. Maybe not a ton, but I think it'll help.
yeah, for sure. My number two is Evan Longoria because of a lot of those reasons. He's had a spectacular career, and his career deserves a World Series with it. I think it would be really positive for him, and just cap off be one of the last things he does in his great career, whenever he retires, whether that be after this year, after next year, after the year after that. It would be nice to have just a World Series to that resume. And yeah, I mean, he was on the Rays when, they don't really spend that much. They don't really are never really in win now mode. Same can be said sort of for the Diamondbacks, but here they are. So, you know, he's a guy that deserves to have a World Series to his resume. So I would feel pretty good for Evan Longoria. What is your number two?
This one might be kind of cheap, but I had a hard time not thinking about this group. But any Rangers fans that are still traumatized from 2011, I'd feel very happy for. I mean, we've talked about it earlier. They were one strike away from winning the World Series twice in one game. They came up empty-handed, and I mean, I would imagine most Rangers fans still think about David Freese and think about how how terrible that loss was. It's probably the most heartbreaking loss maybe that anyone's ever had in baseball history. Um, it's the fact that it would have been their first World Series. Um, they still haven't gotten back to the World Series since. They had never even won a playoff series since, I believe, right? Yeah, they never had. So, if you're a Rangers fan and you've been, constantly thinking about Nelson Cruz making that leap for 12 years in your dreams, like this one's for you. And I would be very happy if you finally get to turn the page on that chapter.
Yeah, for sure. If I'm adding fans into the mix, that's one of the main reasons why I'm rooting for the Rangers is
Yeah, I know
because
we didn't really specify that one, but I was like, you know what? Like, there's no rules here. I can throw that in if I want.
yeah. So in my revision, I'll also have them number two and Longoria three and Lavulo four, and
Yeah.
then number five can be whoever. But yeah, I mean that's a lot of the reason why, I'm very inclined to see the Rangers win a World Series. Longest drought out of any franchise entering this playoffs. They've been in Texas since 1972. They haven't won one, and they've gotten brutally close back in 2011 and had more heartbreak since then as well. But yeah, my number one, I think there might be overlap here, but the number one guy, we'd most be happy for, or at least I'd be most happy for, is the Arizona Diamondbacks general manager Mike Hazen. I think, if you haven't followed his story and the things that have happened to him over the past couple years, it's pretty pretty humbling to see. His wife passed away, I believe, around the summer of 2022, and kind of took a toll on him. And even excluding that, Mike Hazen, like Lavello, has been there for it all. He's been there for the 52 win team. He's been there to kind of rebuild this Diamondbacks team, rebuild this core, add at the deadline, all that. And it would be rewarded, but ultimately it's because I think he's talked about how, like, his wife is here with him in spirit, and she'd be very, very happy with a World Series championship, and he knows she's watching over. So I think that's just the ultimate story of it would be the ultimate victory to get that win for him and for her.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of baseball fans probably don't know about Mike Hazen's personal story, and maybe for better for worse. I'm sure he doesn't want to just be known as the guy who has that story. But yeah, his wife, I believe, had brain cancer and passed away last year, and they also have two very young kids as well. So I mean, I can't imagine obviously what it's like to have to go through that for his kids, for those around him. Um, but like, it's one thing that I read about that I've seen is very cool is that the entire Diamondbacks organization has stepped up for him. Like, Tori Lavello's wife apparently like was driving the kids to school when he was going to visit her in the hospital. Um, everyone has just stepped up for him. And aside from all that, he's a guy that's been there for a while. He's responsible for most of the guys on this team, if not all of them. I mean, I think he got hired after 20 like 16, 15, something like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
think it was after the 2016 season, because I think he had 1 year under Dombrowski with the Red Sox.
right. So I mean, this is, I mean, this is very much his team. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head how many of the guys were acquired by him. I'm sure it's at least like 85 to 90%.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very feel good story. I don't have much else to add. I mean, you said it pretty kind of perfectly.
Yeah, and just looking at the X's and O's of it, as you mentioned, like how much of that team has been acquired by him.
Mhm.
Like I think that Christian Walker trade was his doing. Or that Christian Walker acquisition was done by Mike Hazen. The
Yeah.
Gabriel Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel trade that's worked out tremendously. That is Mike Hazen. He drafted Corbin Carroll 16th overall. It wasn't like it was an obvious choice, but Corbin Carroll was drafted 16th overall and was developed by the Diamondbacks and ended up being, a consensus top three prospect in baseball, and is going to overwhelmingly win National League Rookie of the Year this year. And yeah, I mean, among other guys, I think I believe he acquired Ketel Marte.
Yeah. That trade was after 2016.
Yeah, and ultimately extended him. Um, acquired. Yeah, I think acquired. Yeah, I mean, he traded for Zach Gallen, which has ended up being a good trade for Arizona. I believe acquired Merrill Kelly. Um, so like all the main guys of all the mainstays of this Diamondbacks organization were, acquired by Mike Hazen. So it would be a job well done from him, if they ultimately end up winning this World Series. But yeah, it'll be really competitive. I'm pretty excited to see what happens. Um,
Yeah, and not only that, but like every time a team wins the World Series, you kind of look, some fans will kind of look back and see, okay, the current GM, like how many of them were those guys? How many of the people were those guys? How many were under the previous or previous GM? Like for the Astros last year, James Click won his first, but there was also a lot of Lunau's guys in 2021. Alex Antopoulos won it with the Braves, but there was, uh, what was the guy's name? John Capalella. That was the guy before him, right? There were some of his guys because Antopoulos was hired after the 2017 season. So like, Acuna was already in the organization, Freeman was already in the organization. There were plenty of guys, right? The Dodgers
that
with Andrew Friedman might be a different one because he had been there a while.
I mean, that'll
Mike
happen with
Rizzo.
that'll happen with the Rangers if they win, considering
Yeah,
John
because
Daniels
Chris
is the
Young, John
GM.
Daniels, exactly, right? Like it's very cool to, see, you know, how much of it was built by one guy. In 2018 Red Sox were a perfect example because they cycle through GMs like no other team where it's like there's
Yeah.
Dabrowski guys, there's Charrington guys, there's even a lot of Theo Epstein guys, and he had been fired 7 years before. So,
Yeah, even
it's cool to see, that kind of breakdown. And I think it's very special when it's one guy that built most of it. Like Mike Rizzo with the Nats in 2019, like that team was mostly him. Andrew
yeah,
Friedman with the Dodgers in 2020, that was mostly him. Jeff Luna with the Astros in 2017, that was mostly him.
yeah, yeah, and even not to trail off on the Red Sox, but even the '04 Red Sox, like a lot of that credit was given to
Dan
Dan
Duquette.
Duquette,
Yeah.
the previous GM before Theo Epstein. So
Mhm.
yeah, like having, it's kind of rare to have one guy be credited mostly, like
Like
90%.
overwhelmingly, yeah.
Like it's like all on him. The Red Sox will never have that. When they after they win the 2025 World Series and
Seriously,
eventually
people
the
would be like,
20.
well, I mean, you got to look at what Dave Dombrowski did that one time.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's going to be credit to like Ben Cherington for the 2025-2026 World Series if they happen to win that.
Yeah.
But the Diamondbacks, they stuck with their guy, whether it be Lavello, whether it be Hazen. They had a season where they lost 110 baseball games, and they stuck with them, kept at it, and here they are in the World Series.
Hmm.
How about that? How about that, as we like to say on Above
We
Replacement
do love
Radio?
to say that. Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, either team would be very fun. Like, anytime you get a team winning their first World Series in franchise history, it's very cool. In my time as a fan, I've seen two of those, right? With the Astros in 2017, the Nationals in 2019. In my
Yeah,
lifetime, I don't remember the Diamondbacks and Angels winning their first. I don't remember the White Sox winning their first in 88 years because I wasn't old enough. I don't really remember the Giants winning their first. Like I kind of remember it, but I didn't really understand the historical significance of it. It was their first like in San Francisco in
yeah,
2010.
yeah. And the Cubs one was a crazy
The
one,
Cubs
but
won, obviously, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it wasn't their first, but yeah, I mean everyone understood what that was.
yeah, it was, their drought was far longer than like
Yeah.
the Rangers, for
Yeah.
instance. But
Yeah, I know
still,
they had
like,
already won one, but
and yeah, we do remember how close the Rangers got, and we have seen some of the moments of where the Rangers have gotten so close. It's sort of like a Red Sox effect where, the Red Sox in their 86-year curse, they lost 4 Game 7s of the World Series. Like the
Mhm.
Rangers are in sort of that sentiment. They lost a Game 7 of the World Series. They have blown some good opportunities
Mhm.
in their own sense. So them winning the World Series would be very, very relieving, in a sense that to that fan base. So
One thing
yeah,
that's crazy, by the way, going back to Arizona. Not that this is his fault, but isn't it crazy that the Diamondbacks made the World Series before Paul Goldschmidt?
huh, right, yeah.
Right.
It's
It's funny.
funny
It's
because
also funny because no one from that trade is left. Like Carson Kelly and Luke Weaver are not on the team. That's like 2 teams ago. Carson
yeah,
Kelly's on Detroit now. Luke Weaver played for like 3 different teams this year.
the Cardinals very easily won that trade, but here the
Yeah.
here the Diamondbacks are
Yeah.
just
Yeah. It's
strolling
funny.
along.
It is very funny that that's how it turned out.
Look
Like
at that.
and it's also very funny because like yes, Paul Goldschmidt's the better player, but like I don't think too many Diamondbacks fans are too worried about it because they have Christian Walker at first.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not like first base has been like a glare. Like it's not like they have games where it's like, man, Paul Goldschmidt would have made this team better because Christian Walker, yes, isn't as good as Goldschmidt, but it makes him forget about it. Also, like,
Yeah,
would the Diamondbacks have extended Paul Goldschmidt? I don't think so. Like that's
no,
probably why they traded him to begin with.
yeah, they traded him with 1 year left on his contract.
And the
Um,
Cardinals immediately extended him. Like
yeah,
I think it was pretty clear from the jump. Listen, we're getting Paul Goldschmidt for 1 year, but we're really going to get him for 6, 7 years because we're giving him an extension as soon as we possibly can.
yeah, and ultimately, Goldschmidt's best season and best seasons were in seasons where the Diamondbacks were not competitive.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it hasn't been a disaster for the Diamondbacks organizationally. But yeah, that is a funny point you bring up because I mean that Goldschmidt trade did sort of signify the start of the rebuild for the Diamondbacks.
Hmm.
Ultimately, the trade didn't lead to anything, but um, it I think that rebuild is coming along pretty well.
Yeah.
Ultimately, so it's also funny to think about like what if the what if the Cubs like won two of those games against the Diamondbacks earlier in the regular
Yep.
season?
Yeah. I mean, well, what if Seiya Suzuki caught that ball against the Braves?
Yeah,
I've seen so many hypotheticals where it's like, there was that one Soto, like almost walk-off grand slam that died at the track, and like there was a lot of people arguing like if that ball goes out, the Diamondbacks don't make the playoffs and the Padres go on a run because that was the momentum they needed and they never got. But it's funny to play the hypothetical game with an 84 win team scraping into the playoffs and making the World Series, especially when there was such a competitive NL wildcard race all year. I mean, hell, imagine if the Diamondbacks got the 5 seed, had to go into Philadelphia and just lost that series.
yeah,
Like if they go down 2-0, that's it. And that's what they did in the NLCS. What if the Marlins have to go face the Brewers
yeah, and
and
I
they
mean
face the
like
Braves? Like,
there's a lot of things that would have changed. Like if the Diamondbacks for however they would have been able to do it, beat the Astros in the final game of the regular season. The Rangers get the bye, the Astros end up going to Tampa Bay. Like, how does that turn out? Diamondbacks get the 5 seed,
what
have
if
to
the
go
what
to
if the what if the
Philly.
Astros got more games on the road and less games at home against
Yeah,
the Rangers?
yeah, like what? Yeah, that's why they play the games, as I think Chris Berman says
Yeah.
sometimes. That's why they play the
The
games.
playoff format gets a lot of criticism. I think it's given us so much fun chaos this year, and maybe that's just because my favorite team didn't make the playoffs, and I've not had much of a rooting. It's like not only did my favorite team not make it, but also like the teams that I despise didn't make it. Right? Like we didn't have to, you know, we didn't have to hate watch the Yankees this year. Like we didn't have to, root against any team. Like there was truly not a single team in the playoffs this year would have been like, damn, sucks that that team won.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had pretty much zero rooting interest, zero strong rooting interest
Yeah.
in any of these series. Like, people hate on the Astros, but if the Astros won that game seven, I'd be like, oh, this will be an
I'm very
interesting series.
intrigued to see who like throws out the first pitches for some of these games. Like, do the Rangers bring out Nolan Ryan? Like, like do they
Yeah.
bring out Adrian Beltre if they haven't already? Do the Diamondbacks bring out Randy Johnson? I think I could tell you an answer on Kurt Schilling. Uh, do they bring out like Brandon Webb? Like, who are they rolling out for these first pitches here?
You got friggin' Matt Williams and Tony Womack
Yeah,
going out there.
yeah,
I'd love
yeah,
that.
Luis Gonzalez, who we should have mentioned earlier. Yeah, Tony Womack would be one. Brandon Webb.
They they all have
Both
vacation
teams,
plans for
both
the
teams have both teams have Ian Kennedy coming out.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm very intrigued because like maybe the Rangers have like Elvis Andrews who literally played this year coming out.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's a major
Nelson Cruz who played this year. You know
yeah.
what the Diamondbacks should do?
Um, what should they do?
They should bring out David Freese.
Yeah, they should really.
Like
'Cause
never played for them, played for a division rival actually.
when you said Nelson Cruz, I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like putting Neftali Feliz out there.
Yeah, I think hear me out. Arizona, listen. If you're hearing this, buy, get a flight for David Freeze.
Yeah,
Bring him out. I know he didn't ever suit up for you guys, but like anything for a competitive edge.
absolutely. I know Evan Carter will be really triggered.
Yeah, yeah, his 10-year-old self.
Yeah, who was had no association with the Rangers or even close to it at the time. But it would be pretty badass
You
if
know
they
what
did
the
that.
Diamondbacks should do?
Which it,
They should bring out to trigger Rangers fans. They should bring out Bruce Bochy, the manager of the 2010 Giants. Oh, yeah, I wonder what he's doing right now.
I think
I
that's the
will
best.
probably enjoying retirement somewhere, right?
Probably, yeah. I know he retired after, what was it, 2020, 2019?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's very funny because I've seen so many Giants fans being like, "This sucks. We missed the playoffs," and now Bruce Bochy, like they're saying it as in like "Oh, we shouldn't have let Bruce Bochy go." It's like, no, man, he resigned.
Yeah.
Like he went out on his terms.
He did not plan on managing again and just got the itch, I guess. And
Yeah,
Rangers
it
threw a
is
bunch of money
very
at him.
wild. Like I said this to you the other day, but like I don't think it will happen. But like the way that teams gravitated towards the Royals model in 2015, I wonder if they do it with the Rangers after, if they win this year. It's like go out, spend all of the money. It doesn't matter if it's on 2 or 3 players that you're giving 600, $700 million to. Just like, and it's not even like they had a crazy good farm system either. Like they had a solid farm system, but not like, hey, if we combine these developing players with this win now team, we'll be in the World Series in 2 years. Like I don't think that was part of the plan.
Yeah, no, it wasn't even like the Padres who, like, when they started spending money, the Padres had like a top five farm
Yep.
system. Like Rangers were maybe like fringe top 10, but like, yeah, after 2021, when we talked about the Rangers getting all these free agents, it was like kind of a question of like why? Like I feel like you're wasting some of the
We should
prime
we should
years of these
listen back to
players.
those episodes. I wonder if we straight up like, because I mean, let's be real. No fans had them in the World Series in 2 years.
Yeah, I talked about the Bruce Bochy hiring being like that's kind of a win now move, and they're not really prepared to win now. And look at them in
Yeah.
the World Series. So as we've talked about the implications of this series, it's time to get into a little bit of predictions. It's gone rough for both of us so far this
Yeah.
postseason, but luckily we only have one left. What do you got for this series?
Yeah, it's been a year to forget in terms of predictions, standings predictions, players to watch, postseason predictions. It's been bad across the board. So trying to end off on a high note, I'm gonna go Rangers in 6. I think Zach Gallen has struggled in these postseason matchups. He's going to be starting game 1 against Montgomery, game 5 against Montgomery. Um, I don't know how that's going to go, to be honest. Um, and yeah, I think I see the Rangers winning in 6.
Yeah, and
With that, I gotta go. Unfortunately, I'll let you give your prediction.
yeah, absolutely. So, I'll preface this by saying I think it was a reply or a quote tweet to somebody that was talking about the World Series not really being compelling to a national audience, and people drew a parallel to the 1991 World Series between the Twins and the Braves, which ended up being
Mm,
maybe the greatest World Series ever.
mm.
I'm not saying this one will be the greatest one ever, but I think this is going to be better than a lot of people think it will be. And the Rangers are going to take this in 7. They're going to do it in front of their home crowd, and it's gonna be a party over there. But I think it's gonna be a really good series here, and the Rangers are gonna take it in 7.
Should we do World Series MVP predictions? Just
World
because why
Series
not?
MVP. That's a
I'm
good
not going off
question.
of anything. I'm just going off of pure who comes to mind. Uh, hmm.
That's a good
You
question.
know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go with Josh Young. I'm gonna go with the rookie.
You're gonna go with Josh Young.
For the
I'm
second
trying.
straight year, a rookie wins World Series MVP.
I'm trying to think of someone who like hasn't been dominating yet. Because I feel like there's a lot of good choices in Montgomery, Eovaldi, Garcia, even Evan Carter is a good option. Josh Young is a good guy, a good sneaky guy.
Yeah.
And Corey Seager is kind of the obvious choice, but I'll
Mhm.
stick with one of those guys. I'll say Nathan Eovaldi wins World Series MVP. It just seems
All right.
like he's just going to come out and keep performing no matter what. Um, all right. Well, that shall do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio.
I'm gonna
Um,
go.
and yeah, peace out to Daniel Curran. You can follow him on social media at Daniel_Curran. That is on Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran. Follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. And if you are listening on the Apple Podcasts or Spotify platforms and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. And that is where you can find, the visual aspect of the show, also the YouTube shorts, which I hopefully will be getting back into with this new laptop that I have. But regardless, if you with all that being said, that shall do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking about some of the games that just happened in the 2023 World Series. See you then.
This conversation is over.